Hey guys, welcome to Traditional Bow Hunting Wilderness Podcast. Today we're going to talk about water, which you can see out here. A little bright out there. I'll fix that for you, don't worry. But we're going to talk a little bit about how deer use waterways, okay, and how you can take advantage of them. Before I put this on a tripod here, I want to take a second where I can kind of show this to you and see, and we can give some examples. So if I take this and flip it around where I can see here. So if we look here, you can see how big this water is, okay? It's kind of tucked in here, we're jammed into everything, but you can see that that's pretty good sized water out there. Okay, deer are not going to cross that unless they absolutely have to, but that is too big and too open of an expanse of water. You're looking at probably, 200, 250 yards across that kind of thing, and they're not going out there. But if we look over here, that's why I picked this area, because we're right here. Now if we look over here, okay, and we see this, now we're only talking, 40 yards of water right here. Okay, big difference than what we're seeing out there versus this little cut right here. Now this little cut of water, very crossable. Okay, they will use this. This area will be used to their advantage tremendously, where that is still used, but it is used very differently. So let me take a second here and throw you on the tripod real quick. And just stick you in here so that I can get you set. Hold on 1/2 second for me. Sorry, it's gonna be a little shaky for a minute. And actually, let me turn off that one setting on here too real quick. I think I can do it while I'm on it, and I can. And there we go. And we're gonna put this in here where I kind of tuck into this corner where it's a little more shaded. So we should be good now. All right, so now with that said, what we're thinking about here, we got to understand is that deer use water many different ways, all right? When the waterways are small enough, and I'm gonna say, when I say small enough, I'm gonna guess probably, I'm gonna, again, get in the shade a little better here. So when I say small enough, I'm talking about waterways that are 70 yards across or less, okay? That's what I'm referring to. That's what's gonna matter for me. That's the interesting thing. If it's less than 70 yards wide of water they gotta cross, these deer are not afraid to use it, and they will take advantage of it. That's like your rivers and your creeks and things like that. Maybe 50 yards. The smaller the better, the more usable they are. But big water, like we were just showing you, is still very usable, but it's usable as a no-go area. We know that the deer are not gonna go out there. So then it becomes a matter of transitions and how they use the edges. One thing about water is usually there's a lot of thicker vegetation around it that grows up there. It's cooler, there's water there for them to drink, there's food that grows along the banks and even in the water right below the surface that they take advantage of aquatic food sources in there. Water is a tremendous asset. Water also provides a security factor as a barrier to entry that other hunters won't go into, and deer know that. They know where that stuff is. And deer today are getting more and more weary of transition lines. They're not there. They look at them a lot different. There's too many people that are hunting transition lines in certain ways. I actually have a video on my Patreon channel that I'm not giving out to the general public that talks about alternative ways to hunt transitions and the things that we normally do in pressured areas because of what the deer are doing. How the deer has altered their routes and travel based on pressure in those areas. So it's a great video if you're, and it is member only. Sorry, get mad if you want to. It is what it is. Some information I'm just not giving out to the general public. There's information that I give to my friends that I know personally and I want to, and then there's stuff you put on YouTube and there's a difference there. Well, that stuff for my friends I also have been putting on my Patreon channel, so it's there. But point being that water is tremendous for deer. Okay, the way they use it is a tremendous terrain feature that you need to be paying attention to. When you do, you want to look for points and things like this and where they're going to, the narrowest spot of that water for them to cross over to. Heaviest amounts of cover on the two sides that they can travel through, because they know they got to cross that open little bit of water. They want to do it where the water is narrowest, and they want to do it where there's the most cover. They're not so worried as they leave, but when they come out and they exit, they want security cover there. Okay, they also want to do it in like the, you want the wide straight parts of the water, not too much. They're not going to cross much on corners because of the depth and how water washes them out on a lot of the bends. So these are things you got to take into consideration. but deer use water basically 3 different ways for travel. One is for cover and bedding, because they like it down there. It's usually thick, it's wet, and people aren't going to be there, and it gets them into bedding where people aren't going to bother them, so they like the surrounding terrain around the water. They will cross water because they have no choices sometimes, and it's the path of least resistance just to cut right across. And they will also use it like a wall and parallel water, okay? So water is a major deer movement if you know how to use it and look for it. If you watch the way a river snakes through the terrain, every time it bends this way and then it comes out and it bends further this way, those deer know how far out all those bends are when they make that travel. They know exactly where they are. So as they're doing that traveling and they're doing that cutting through there, that's a perfect funnel point. If you got 200 yards from the river all the way out to where the farthest bend is, you know that regardless of anywhere in that 200 yards that these deer want to travel along that river, when they hit that far out bend, they have to go around it. That far out bend, so if it goes like this, and then like this, that far one, that's an excellent pinch point. That's an incredible funnel. And you want to take advantage of that. Now, again, like I said, there's a lot of people taking advantage of that. We have way more hunters in the woods, and we have way more skilled hunters that are mobile hunting, learning the stuff I teach, learning the stuff Dan Infalt teaches, the stuff that they show you on the Hunting Public, all this kind of stuff. You know, Eberhard, everybody out there is teaching amazing ways to hunt. And with that said, there's a lot more people that are in equipment that makes it easier. You know, used to be where the only mobile version of hunting was a tree saddle, the original tree saddle, or the Lone Wolf assault stand. Otherwise, everything else was super heavy, inconvenient, cumbersome, and nobody wanted to use them. Now the equipment has made it so much easier. So there's a lot more people out there now that are hunting these ways, and that makes for a challenge. So these simple things, such as that river that goes and then you get a wide one, okay, that you're probably thinking, wow, that's a perfect funnel, it's a great pinch point. Yes, it is, but again, in a pressured area, chances are you get there and you're going to see stands or evidence of other people that hunt there, because it is such a simple method to do. So hunting water is fantastic, but you need to think outside the box a little bit how to hunt them. The standard methods of catching the creek crossings, using the terrain to funnel them, using the water to funnel them, using big water as no-go areas, all of these are fantastic and they work, but the more pressure there is in an area, the more creative you have to be. Remember that a deer, anytime you step foot in the woods, he knows that you were there. I don't care what rubber boots you're wearing or what scent lock suit you're wearing. I don't care any of that stuff. He knows that you're there. If you stand there for 10 seconds, he knows you're there. All of your dead cells hit the ground. He knows you're there. You cannot fool him. When a deer starts learning that these high terrain feature areas, such as water and these funnels and stuff that are created around them, when they start getting littered up with a lot of people, deer will change their habitats and use it differently. That's the stuff now that, like I said, is on my Patreon channel. That's the kind of stuff that, how to deal with that kind of thing is not, and the reason I'm not giving it out here now is because the reason I have to change these methods is because so many of us give it out here for free. So that information is there if you want it on the Patreon channel, which is down in the links below for you. But when you're on water, it's always good to start with the basics and then let the sign tell you what's happening. Because if the sign is there, when I say the sign, I'm not talking about trails that are this deep and wore out, because that could have been made before hunting season, before anybody got out there. It's hunting season when you're doing these, or right before, but you need to know that deer are currently there. That comes in the forms of tracks, scat, and rubs and scrapes and things like that that are along that sign. If you're not finding it, at the very least, tracks are my biggest one, because I can tell, tracks are fresh, it's easy. Rubs, you can't tell if they're a day old or 5 days old or what they are. You don't know what's going on with some of that. Tracks and poop are solid. So I look for both of those. If I'm finding those in those key general areas, the crossings, the funnels created by the water, how they get around the big no-go areas of water they don't want to go through, pinch points between there, all the things I mentioned, if they're hitting those spots and I'm seeing fresh sign in there, fresh tracks, fresh poop, game on, I'm good. If they're not, then it's not gonna work. Don't bother setting up there if there's not fresh sign, because either they're not using it because of different food sources or bedding areas that they have to, something else is cutting them off before they can get to there and it's not worth it for them, or too much hunting pressure around there has caused them to slow down. See, transition lines, like I said, if you have a transition line along a swamp and you go out there and you look at a spot and you're like, oh, this point there's nobody, I don't see any sign of anybody, that's great. But if there's 15 more tree stands down there, you know, in the next half mile, all on that transition line is dead. Again, stuff I'm going to teach you how to handle in that Patreon channel, but you need to keep that in mind. It could be a cause. So let the tracks and the poop solve your problems for you. Find those terrain features that water creates. Check them for the sign. If the sign is fresh and it's hot, it's there, shoot up a tree, shoot a deer, go home, call it good. Thanks for watching.